think an interesting thing to make note of is if you've done a good job prior to making both of these big decisions were around expansion and payroll and the numbers, right, surrounding your respective expansions, but having good cash flow and having good cash reserves and being properly capitalized before you make some of these decisions gives you the wiggle room to not be perfect.
The decision that was 10 years ago was a huge decision. It's a lot about the expansion of brick and mortar facilities. We had to decide, are we going to expand? We try to find an existing building. Do you build it yourself? So all these things had to align. That really wasn't the toughest decision. The toughest decision was, if we do this, it was going to cannibalize our best location at the time.
I would say mine all deal with personnel. I think those are the biggest decisions, especially as you're scaling. If you have one location and you have a really good core group of people, as you get way bigger, and your staff is probably not thinking the same thing. We did lose some people just because a lot of people resist change.
What is happening, beautiful people? Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Build Your Gympire podcast. You're in the right place if you're a personal trainer, gym owner, box owner, fitness pro that's looking to grow your gym, grow your business in ways that you, your team, your community, the people you serve, and not least importantly, your bank account are going to feel absolutely awesome about. All right, so today we're going to talk about decisions. Obviously, we have a couple of very impressive leaders on the call here today, and thought it'd be fun to talk about some of the toughest decisions that you guys have had to make over the course of the past year, couple years, whatever it is. But basically, what was the toughest decision you had to make? Why'd you end up going in the direction that you did? So what did you end up deciding? Why'd you go in that direction? How'd it turn out? Maybe what would you do differently? What'd you learn from it? So Mark, you get to tee us off on this one. What was the toughest decision you had to make in the past year or two?
Yeah, I like this question because where my mind initially went, because I like to totally overanalyze and try to give really discerning answers, of course, right? So I think decision making obviously is relative of the context and time, right? So the decision that was 10 years ago, it was a huge decision. Was it a big decision, or was it just a big decision at the time with my given skill set, right? So I think now that I like the context of the last year or two, because it's much better. So the last year or two, for us at this stage, it's a lot about expansion of, in our case, brick and mortar facilities, right? And where, not necessarily, this one wasn't necessarily about like where to put the next one. We kind of have we had an idea of where to put it. This is our fourth location that we actually end up building from scratch, right? Which is another decision to do. So this is a kind of multiple mini decisions all rolled into one strategic big decision, right? Of a growth and expansion. So we had to decide, are we going to expand? Yes or no? Where are we going to do it? Do we try to find an existing building? Do you build it yourself? So all of these things had to align. If you're going to build it yourself, are you willing to deal with a little different? What are the effects of that, right? So all that considering, at the end of the day, that really wasn't the toughest decision. The toughest decision was, if we do this, it was going to cannibalize our best location at the time. So, which again, when you make a new location, the majority of the time, it's about making a location, opening a new facility, right? And launching it and then filling it with new people. This was very unique because I never had to really do this before. This was going to be literally like half your membership is going to this new facility. So what are you going to do about the existing one, right? And so it's a different context for sure, different little problem to solve. We've always opened facilities and had other members go to them, of course, but not in the wave that this was about to happen. So this also was coupled with uncertainty because it was a new build when we were actually going to open. And so now the launch was a little bit screwed up. We had to hire people, which I know those are always big decisions to make too on the personnel front, but we had to hire a bunch of people, and also at our existing facilities, but also for the new one with an unknown timeline. So that was a nice little cluster of 4 or 5, 6 months of really a lot of uncertainty and a lot of scenarios, but ultimately we decided to do it, open it up. You kind of just let time take care of the hiring and the personnel and stuff, and that fell into place. And so far so good. We had a strategic plan to grow the new one, and a strategic plan to kind of reload at the existing one in a patient, good timeline in order to do that. And hey, what did you know? Team is really strong. Standards are stronger than ever. New location going well, very well. and the one that we had to reload is also going well, right where is right where we expected, 9 months later. So, but yeah, big decision, and yeah, a lot of moving parts with that one.
So what would you do differently, if anything?
I would have had I would have had better. And this is again, this was 11 years into business, being really good, and this is going to be our fourth location. We already had three. We still didn't have our roles defined how we needed. So it really wasn't it was more about the roles that we had to fill, and they were a little muddied. And I think that's something else, probably a different discussion. But as you grow and expand, the bigger you get, the more those roles have to be very, very, clearly defined, very clearly defined, and revisited, because it's a different operation. So because those roles are a little muddied, um, then and we were moving people around and having different leaders and managers develop and all this stuff. So it was a bit, it was a cluster with that, and that's what made it harder than what it needed to be.
So we had like you knew you wanted to expand, right? Like we knew that that was sort of a driving force behind the decision. And then you've got the risk, not just of expanding and the capital that goes into that. In your case, right, the locations are typically bigger, so it's a bigger capital outlay. Like you've got all the normal sort of, oh, I'm making the decision to expand. But in this case, it was also a situation where, all right, we're going to hurt. Like we know we're going to hurt our current, like one of the current facilities based on this expansion. It'll help maybe the opening of the new one, and so you had to have I guess the sales, marketing, whatever strategy, not to mention the staffing, right, to go along and support that. But because you're the old seasoned vet that you are, things went okay. We just fucking deal with the team stuff with a little bit more seasoning for the next one. Is that the summary?
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Nice.
it was also probably one of the biggest, it wasn't necessarily the biggest decisions, one of the biggest challenges I had to face in recent times, because the uncertainty of an open date. So if you could imagine, like, and we train athletes and adults, our summer is really busy. So our whole goal was
Mm-hmm.
to get in there before we launched summer. We knew it was going to be tight to begin with, but they ended up being 4 or 5 weeks late on the construction. So I had 15 staff members under one roof for a month, um, paying them, pretty much full
Yeah.
go. Like, so it's just a trickle down effect of, all that uncertainty. And that's what comes with growth and risks. And it was not a fun time at all, but again, it passes. And as long as it's like, it was costly, but I like to think that we learned a ton from it. And I did. I grew a ton as a leader, as a CEO, as a decision maker going through that. And hopefully now it's on me as a nice little challenge to make sure that quote unquote investment pays off. Right. So I think that's what's really exciting about it. And we're much better armed for future expansions.
I like it. Connor, what you got?
I would say mine all deal with personnel. I think those are the biggest decisions and things that you have to work through, especially as you're scaling. If you have one location and you have a really good core group of people, as you get, you know, just like we talk about the conversations, right? So we have these conversations with people, and we, like, think bigger, and all these opportunities, and you have to realize that the majority of your staff are not having those same conversations. They're not being exposed to, the different avenues that could be possible. So if you're thinking in a way bigger, and your staff is probably not thinking the same thing. So one of the biggest things that we dealt with was, as we got ready to scale and how big we wanted to go, or how big ultimately I wanted to go as a CEO, my core group of staff members at my headquarters, I guess you can say, we were on different pages of what we wanted to go and how fast we wanted to go. So dealing with personnel with that, I mean, we did lose some people just because I guess some people, a lot of people resist change, and they want to keep in their little bubble and stay the exact same. And, if you're trying to grow your business, obviously, you can't, what's your quote, Mark? You can't have growth at the same
Growth and comfort can never
growth.
coexist.
Yeah. Growth and comfort could never coexist. So that was a huge one. I think as you're growing and scaling, making convenient promotions or hires and elevating current staff members into roles that either one, they are not ready for, not equipped for, and then two, you as the leader and managing them are not equipped to get them up to speed quick enough. And so that's a huge issue that we dealt with. Another personnel thing that we deal with, just as Mark was just saying, it's as you're growing and scaling and opening up new locations, something that I always think about, especially the model that I do. Our model is a staff member of 2 full-time people. It's a constant balance act of when you're bringing those staff on, especially when you're bringing that second person on. Are you hiring both right out the gate? Are you hiring one, your facility leader or your director right out the gate, and then bringing on that head coach later on because you're going to go with a shortened? You can tell, you can hear it in my voice of the anguish I have. Are you bringing that person on with a shortened schedule and then building that schedule out until that next person comes on? So it's like a balancing act of, do you invest in the personnel right now, knowing that when it is time to go, they're already ready to go. But you're going to be burning some cash. I mean, having 14 people under one roof sounds like a nightmare that Mark had to deal with. I deal with it on a smaller scale, but like those are definitely some of the big things that you're dealing with. And then, as Mark said, like standards, that's one of the biggest things that we'll continue to do. As we scale our product quality, we have someone that literally all they do is product quality. That's the seat that they sit in, and their eyes are 100% focused on product quality and coaching development. And so our standards continue to raise up, and they for sure have never been higher and more dialed in than they are right now. And so when someone does not fit into that standard, even if it's a very, very tough decision, firing or replacing that person. And, even though we're a larger team than we've ever been before, you still have relationships. And, when that is no longer a good fit, having the courage to go have that difficult conversation and make a change, because that it's the better for the future and better for the bigger picture. All those personnel changes and decisions always will be the toughest and biggest for me.
Damn, that's loaded. However,
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking like, all right, so what would what was the actual decision in terms of bringing people on early? Like, what did you end up doing?
So
Just
in
like
my
specifically in that
in my second flex, we had 2 full-time staff members, 6 before pre-sale. So basically
Gotcha.
8 weeks before grand opening.
Yeah.
So, we were burning cash, and it was kind of like, all right, what do I have them do? And so we were doing their training and onboarding. And then I was like, man, I need to leverage it a little bit more. So they were painting, they were setting up, they were doing stupid shit where that was definitely a learning lesson. And so we've changed it a little bit now, because we had about $100,000 in payroll at that location, and our pre-sale didn't go as this is before we were working with Gym Member Machine, BTW. Our pre-sale did not go well, and we had about 13 members for $100,000 in payroll day one grand opening. What are you doing there? That doesn't look good.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. We're gonna get it on my face.
Yeah, so I mean that was one. And I'm kind of as even keeled as I see him. I'm on opposite side of the spectrum guy. So then in our next one, we pulled it, and maybe we overworked that facility leader, right? Because we put it 100% on him day one opening. And it was, probably a little bit too many split shifts right out the gate, because we tried to chunk down the schedule and make it a little bit more optimal, but maybe not optimal enough. And so, hey, what's that perfect balance? Those are the decisions that you're going to have to make. At what point do you bring on that second person? Is it a member total? Like, hey, once we get to, again, I'm speaking specifically my model, or the model that I'm in. Is it a member total? Like, hey, once we get to 60 members in the pre-sale, that's when we're bringing on that head coach or that second coach. Does that mean you already have that person identified, or are you opening up the job search at 60 members? You know what I'm saying? Like it's just
Yeah.
boom, 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 that thought process and making that decision and making it the most efficient and effective way possible.
So what do you think you'd do now? Like if you're, I don't want to announce things, right? But like, let's say you're opening another one. What's your plan for that one?
Uh it's all I will say. I would like to be a little bit further along than I am currently right now because I want to make sure that I can, and there's always going to be changes, but I want to basically have a pre-sale on a box. Is my pre-sale predictable and repeatable enough that we can plug and play into future locations?
Hmm.
Once I can confirm that is the case, then I'll bring both of those people on at the exact same time because then we'll be able to continue to leverage our training and onboarding. So we have our training and onboarding. It takes 4 weeks to hit our coaching quote unquote certification
Yeah.
internally. So right now, if we're bringing them on at different times, it's an 8 week block. If we can go right together, now we're leveraging our director of training more efficiently, and we can put them together, onboard them at the exact same time. But this is all predicated that our pre-sale runs
Yeah.
effectively and does well enough.
Yeah. I think an interesting thing to like to make note of is if you've done a good job prior to making like both of these big decisions were around expansion and payroll and the numbers right surrounding your respective expansions and the again not to make assumptions about either one of your business's bank accounts, but having good cash flow and having good cash reserves and being properly capitalized before you make some of these decisions gives you the fucking wiggle room to not be perfect, right? On timing, XYZ. Like, because what do they say? The number one like rule of business to be able to keep growing is just like don't fucking die, right? Like if you just don't do that and you can keep playing the game, you're probably going to do okay. And so having some wiggle room from a cash perspective allows you to be more wrong than if you have less cash, which I think is maybe an instructive thing for folks who are listening to this, thinking about opening their first, second location, doing some sort of expansion. Like, hey, these guys that have done it a handful of times at this point, each of you still, you know, like you're still working through stuff. You're still learning
Yeah, we'll definitely always be working through stuff, right?
100%.
I mean,
100%.
because there's there's not a there's definitely not a best way. There's not an end result that we're trying to get to, but there's a more optimal way, right?
Yeah.
There's an improved way. And I know Mark is never complacent, right? That's one of his core values. I mean, we're trying to improve every single day. 100%. So as I say, our standards have never been higher. It's because we continue to push for that. Like we're not going to get to a point where we'll be like, that's good enough. I think I'm okay with that.
Mhm.
I mean, and so we'll continue to push the envelope and making it the best version and the next version. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
speak
That's
to
one
that,
of,
like
go
what
ahead,
GR
Mark.
was saying as well, like from a cash perspective, like that goes involved. That's earlier on in the decision making process, anyways. Like you shouldn't even be thinking about expanding if that box isn't checked. And
Yeah.
quite frankly, that's one of the biggest boxes that need to be checked. How are we going to fund this? How are we going to invest in this? If stuff goes wrong, are we okay? Because we have like what Connor just said, we're always gonna be working towards something else or solving another issue. I don't want the stress of a cash flow problem hanging over my head with that. Yes, we want to optimize it as best we can and be as efficient as possible, but there's too much going on, and big decisions like this or huge expansions or a lot of this personnel decisions being made that you got to make sure like that other box is checked if push came to shove. Um, and I think that's where then because here's the thing, then it bleeds into the next bigger decision. So continuing on with what we did, and you may be asking too, why'd you have that many people under one roof? Well, it's like, 'cause again, we were taking half our membership. We were opening a gym with almost a
Mhm.
full, not like all the way, like there was still room to grow, but basically a full roster of people coming in with an expectation of level of service that they were getting. So now you need to staff that appropriately, but also staff for growth. And then you have to dictate how much could we grow in this busy season and all this extra stuff. And then continuing on from there. And then it's like the marketing side, right? Obviously we work with Gym Memory Machine and have for the last, I think, 6 years, or coming up on 6 years. But even internally now, this was our fourth location.
Should send you a coffee mug or something.
Yeah, right. Thank, appreciate it. Yeah, we got to get something. Get us a card. This will be our fourth location. So all the community stuff we do. Again, we have youth athletes, high school athletes, adults. Like there's a lot of things to kind of market and do that. So that led us to, hey, we need to build out these roles. Do we want to hire an internal marketing department? Like, is that something that we need to do? How would that work? So then it just feeds into the more decisions and more strategy, more onboard. So now you're not just onboarding a coach or a manager, you're onboarding a whole different position and a whole different department, which there's then what's the growth strategy for those, right? So it just feeds into the machine. And that's why I think when you do, not to overwhelm people, but when you do start expanding and moving a little faster, right, your rate of learning becomes so much faster that it's a great thing, but you better be buckled up for the ride. And that's where the mentorship, the leaning on a marketing agency, or leaning on a mastermind or other guidance is extremely important, because you're going too fast not to. You need to have that mentorship and that guidance in your back pocket if you want to grow, and especially grow quickly.
Yeah, love it, love it, love it. Well, I think that was some great stuff, gentlemen. I want to be respectful of all of our time. We're a little over time for today, but good stuff. If you guys want more episodes like this, want to get inside the heads of Mark, Connor, you can even get inside my head if you want, maybe next time. Let us know. Let us know in the comments. Let us know in a review. Love, hugs. Appreciate the hell out of you. We'll see you next week.